Hello and welcome to this InDesign Fundamentals training video. My name is John Griffiths and I'm a member of the Technical Services team whose job it is to support yourselves with software training. In consideration that most users will need to view this video as well as operate software on a single screen, I've chosen YouTube for this task due to its effectiveness at rescaling when in windowed mode, as well as running on separate devices such as smartphones or tablets. This video consists of an introduction to the software, the user interface, and the core design elements, followed by a practical work-along exercise. So let's start with an introduction to the software. InDesign is a program for creating multimedia and typically multi-page documents. Consider the output from any typical design project during your studies. For example, a collection of images or a mood board, prototype sketches or a scale drawing, a collection of test renders, a work diary explaining your process, physical prototypes or models, photographs of site research or images which document your process. InDesign is a program which you then use to combine all these elements so that your progress can be assessed or that your skills can be presented to others. In terms of its commercial use, when you pick up any magazine or look at an online PDF portfolio, it is very likely to have been produced using InDesign. It absolutely dominates the print and publishing industry. You can use alternative programs to produce layout, such as Microsoft Publisher, PowerPoint or Word, as well as Photoshop, but InDesign is the best software for this task. For years, Adobe has had very little competition, but very recently, products from Affinity are offering a viable and cheaper alternative, although currently this software occupies a very small market segment when compared to Adobe. Once the software is launched, you should be looking at a screen similar to what I have here. If this is the first time you've opened the software, you will be missing all these recent documents and instead be looking at something with page size templates. If you're working on a single screen and haven't done so already, this might be a good time to resize both InDesign and the video window. If you're not already aware, it's worth mentioning that even though YouTube doesn't feature a 10-second advance or rewind button, the function does still exist as a keyboard shortcut. Pressing K will pause your video at any point, J will rewind it by 10 seconds, and L will advance it by 10 seconds. These functions should help you follow along effectively during the exercises. So returning to our InDesign screen, we have four options on the left-hand side. These are Home, Learn, Create and Open. It's possible that the Learn option won't be displaying for you. If this is the case, be aware that this content can still be accessed directly by opening the Creative Cloud app from the taskbar tray and then choosing Tutorials. If you do have Learn here, click on it and it will give you direct access to relevant Adobe learning materials. Most videos here are quite short and easy to follow. If you scroll to the bottom of this list and click on the link to adobe.com and then wait a few seconds, you will find additional InDesign videos and exercises. Click up here to access the account's web apps and services. And a relatively new addition here is the Portfolio app, which will give you some basic web layout formatting options and allow you to fill a template with examples of your work. You can then host it from Adobe servers for free. Finally, and perhaps the most useful resource, which I can no longer seem to find a direct link to, is the Behance website. The For You section works very similarly to Pinterest. You can create a selection of areas of interest, and the site provides you with a stream of contributor work relevant to your interests. The Discover tab suggests other work which has been highly recommended, and the Live Stream section hosts Adobe credited professionals demonstrating techniques and critiquing work. This generally happens for several hours per day, and past videos are also archived here. Jobs also lists a collection of creative vacancies available, and finally, the Create a Project option on the right allows you to post your own work here and share it with the community. This can be a very useful tool for growing your profile. Okay, let's get back to the program. We're going to be creating a new document, so we're going to click on Create New, or use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl+N. The new document window will open, and you may notice that the window looks very similar to the new document window in Adobe Photoshop. The way we approach a new project, however, needs to be different from the outset. Unlike Photoshop, where we only really need to get going once we have a blank page in front of us, with InDesign, our design decisions need to start with the creation of the document itself. The way we format this document will have a direct impact on how our content will be organized and presented. So let's quickly familiarize ourselves with the options available here. In the main window, you should see a list of document page sizes. These refer to the documents I've previously created. Yours will likely look different. Note that whatever we are seeing in this window is directly linked to the tab which is highlighted from the bar which runs across the top of the window. It should always default to recent when you open this window. Our other options are saved. This deals with saved templates, which we won't be needing for this lesson. And the three remaining options are print, web and mobile. These are dedicated to defining the intent of our document. If it's for print, a book, a magazine or an online PDF, we choose print. If we are designing content to be hosted on a website, we would choose web or mobile, depending on the primary device it will be viewed on. Each option will choose the most common document sizes, unit measurements and workspace arrangements for that given output. For your work submissions, you will almost always want to choose print at this point. With print selected, the options we get in the main window are whether we wish to create a new document or use a pre-existing template. InDesign template files are pre-designed layout files which can be populated with generic data such as addresses, maps or images. They're typically used for small jobs where the client has no involvement regarding the design. I'd strongly recommend against using templates in projects as they are easily identified as commercial templates and will often cost you more time in order to adapt them to your needs than if you were to build the layouts from scratch. With that being said, template examples can be useful in influencing the development of your own layout designs. Selecting one of these templates and then clicking See Preview will give you clear examples of the page designs. Normally, you can also go ahead and download the template to further examine how it was put together, but as you can see from this error message, there currently exists an issue as of the time of this recording, which prevents this access. I've been informed that this is an issue with Adobe and will hopefully be resolved soon. So looking now instead at our blank document presets and clicking View All Presets to expand the options, you're going to want to pick the document size in accordance to what's specified in your project brief. For this example, I'm going to select a standard A4, which should highlight in blue. If we now turn our attention to the preset details section on the right hand side, this is where we personalize the document we wish to create. You can rename the document to something more meaningful here. I'll name mine GD Year 1 Project and then version 1, but feel free to rename it as you see fit. You'll notice at the top that the exact dimensions of our document are being displayed. These can still be adjusted here if required. Our measurement unit should be set to millimeters as default, so we can leave that as it is. Just below this, we can see our orientation, portrait or landscape. I'm going to choose landscape here. Next, we can choose the number of pages we desire. If you know how many pages you need, you can enter it here. If you don't, you can always set it to a low value and add pages later. I'm going to set mine to 4. The Start field is where you can specify at which page you want InDesign to start counting pages. We can leave this at 1. Next, we have a tick box called Facing Pages. If we are producing a single page, such as a poster, or a PDF portfolio made up of a series of single pages, we would turn this off. If instead we wanted to create a book type document with a cover, a back page, and double page spreads, then we would leave this ticked. I want to keep things as basic as possible right now, so I'm going to untick this. The primary text frame option will automatically put text frames on every page. We would turn this on only if our intention was to create a text-only book. So the next few options allow us to add guides in order to help us fill out our document with content. We can see the effects they will have by checking the preview box at the bottom of the window. You will also likely need to reduce the size of the options box and reposition it so you can see the preview better. So to start with, we have columns and column gutter options. If we adjust these up and down a little, we'll get a feel for what they do. Essentially, we're creating guides to help us organize our text and images. I'm going to set this to 5 with a 4mm gutter. These values aren't so important and can be changed later on. Margins are essentially another guide, but are used to define the outside boundaries of your content. The chain icon can be turned off if you wish to adjust the margins independently. The size you set your margins comes down to personal taste. Sometimes our content can continue right to the edge of the page, but this is relatively rare. If you have a magazine nearby, quickly flicking through it will usually demonstrate where the margins have been set. The important thing to remember here is that guides can be adjusted later or totally ignored when needed, and won't be visible when your document is exported. Bleed and slug both concern aspects of printing and only become relevant if you plan to have your document professionally printed. Bleed creates a red guide outside the limits of the page, which we then use to align our borderless content to. This prevents the possibility of the image running out before the edge of the page is reached. Slug is for adding printing information, which will then be removed during the printing process. So with every option covered, we can go ahead and hit Create to confirm all these settings. One final thing to note regarding document creation is that typically this task will take around 10 seconds to complete when we know what we want. Just to demonstrate this, we can just hit Ctrl+N to create a new document, followed by the Enter key to confirm. Just one quick thing to mention regarding keyboard shortcuts is that even though these videos support a PC-based interface, almost all shortcuts are the same with Macs, with the substitute of Control being Command and Alt being the Option key. Okay, so now we're ready to start working. You may be noticing that the appearance of my interface is different to yours. This is being caused by a few factors, one of them most likely being scaling. The resolution of your screen will play a part in this, but there are also controls in the preferences to modify the program's scaling. From the menu bar, left-click Edit, then Preferences, and choose UI Scaling. If you have a HD display, you should be able to choose between a low and high scale factor. I've chosen the low option here to give myself more workspace room. However, as a new user, you may feel more comfortable with a higher scale factor, which will make tool options appear larger. I'll leave this decision up to you. If you have chosen to change your scaling, you'll see a warning telling you that InDesign will need to restart for the changes to take effect. Feel free to pause the video and do just that. Remember that you can simply press Ctrl+N to make a new document and fine-tune the other elements while we work. Stay in for a moment with preferences. Take a moment to appreciate just how many aspects of the program can be customized from here. I've made 2 adjustments to the preferences, which you too might want to adjust. Firstly, I've turned dynamic spelling on by going to the Spelling tab and activating it. This may have changed recently, but traditionally spell checking is turned off by default, and I find turning it on is helpful when working with text. I would still advise that you create all your text using dedicated word processors, however, and then import it once it's complete. Secondly, go into Display Performance and setting Greek type below to a value such as 2 points will ensure small text remains legible. Okay, that's preferences done with. There is, however, one final important thing to adjust from the menu options. A very common issue that new users notice is that their images appear pixelated when working in the program. This is typically an intentional effect. As InDesign can commonly be used to produce documents with several hundred pages and over 1,000 images, the software reduces the display quality to save on memory. If we are working on a small or medium-sized document, however, we can override this by going to the View heading on the menu bar and then Display Performance and turning on High Quality Display. If your images are still showing pixelation, then unfortunately this is probably caused by your file size. Next, let's take a look at how the workspace is being displayed. If this is the first time you're using InDesign, then the workspace is likely to be set to its default, which is Essentials. You can check this by looking in the right-hand corner of the menu bar. It should state the word Essentials here. If it says something else, or if you just wish to adjust the workspace, you can click on the word and you will get a drop-down with a bunch of workspace presets to pick from. The idea behind this is that depending on the task we're completing, we can adjust the way InDesign presents its tools for that task. Spend a few moments trying out some of these alternative workspaces and note the new tools which become available. Now, the great thing about using the Essentials workspace is that it keeps the toolbar bloat very low and frees up more space to work on our projects. Properties, Pages and CC Libraries are the three dock panels on the right-hand side which the workspace prioritizes for easy access. If you click on Properties, it will expand to provide you with the most likely editing options that you would currently need. The options in the properties will actively change depending on the specific task you're working on. For example, we could press M to select the Shape tool by default, or you can just click on the icon from the toolbar. This will likely be set to a square. Left click to drag out a few square shapes and you will notice that your options in the properties will change. Next, press T on the keyboard to select the text tool, or select the T from the toolbar. Hover your cursor over one of the shapes and you will notice a small circle will appear. Click and the shape will be designated as a type frame. Notice that the options have changed again in the properties. Finally, press Escape to cancel this and choose the Selection tool. Normally, we could press V to select this tool, but in this instance, we would have just typed the letter V in our text box. Hold down Ctrl and press A. This will select all the content on the page. Then press the Delete key to remove it. Now, in the future, you may find working with the Essentials workspace more effective, but for these exercises, I would like you to instead set the workspace to Advanced. The term Advanced is rather misleading here, as it has no impact on the tools or functions that InDesign offers. Rather, the only real advancement is through the increased level of control we get from more of the program's functions being easy to access. Notice now how many more panels are docked on the right-hand side. The panels now give a good insight into the many of InDesign's core features. You can further customize your workspace by right-clicking and closing the ones you don't want, undocking and moving them to a more convenient place, or docking them to different rows. You can get additional panels by going to the Windows heading and adding them to your collection. If something goes wrong and you lose the panels which you wanted, you can always just go back to the workspace area and choose Reset Advanced from the drop-down. This option will reset whatever workspace you currently have selected. The last thing to note from the drop-down is the new workspace option just below. This will allow you to create and save your own custom workspace, which is common practice for professional users. Finally, notice we have a whole new bar of buttons just below the menu bar. This is called the control bar and works very similar to the properties panel in that the functions change depending on the tool which has been selected. Okay, that's workspaces covered. We're now going to start working on our first exercise. We're going to start by creating a basic layout. Perhaps the best thing about learning InDesign is that in comparison to other Adobe programs like Photoshop or Illustrator, the skill level required to produce high quality results is relatively low. A few hours investment is all that's needed to get you familiar with all the main functionality. Further study of the software will still teach you about more functions and effects, But far more important is that you're able to bring high quality imagery to fill the pages, as well as having solid design skills to develop your layouts. We'll be covering InDesign's core features and controls as we work, so let's get started. InDesign documents are normally made up of three elements: images, text, and graphics. Less commonly, only one or two of these elements are involved. Now we could get started by designing a template of how we wish to organize our layout, but I think we should just stay loose at this point until we get more confident. The first thing we're going to do is bring some images onto the page. Now it should be noted that these images you're bringing in need to be of high quality. They should be a good file size, preferably 300 pixels per inch, I'll expand on that a bit later, and processed in Photoshop so that the flaws have been removed and the colours and exposure balanced. Also, I'd strongly advise that you organise your content before you get started so that your images, text, fonts, and saved InDesign files all live in the same location. This will significantly reduce the potential of losing content, which is a real possibility with badly organised files. The images I will use for this demonstration have already been downloaded from a copyright-free website and moved into my folder. It's likely that you are in a situation where you already have a collection of content that you wish to use to produce your layout. I would recommend that you use your own images for these exercises. However, if you find yourself without any material, placeholder images, such as the ones I'm using, can be downloaded for free from websites such as Unsplash or Pexels. Please be aware that even though these images are normally copyright free, crediting the author in your document is good practice. So once we have our images in a folder, we can bring them into InDesign. The first thing to warn you against is copy and pasting images directly into the program. Even though this process will work, it will result in several problems later down the line, including inflated file sizes, an inability to edit, and file corruption. Instead, InDesign works on a system where images don't actually exist in the file, but rather are linked, meaning that every time you see an image, the software is loading it into the document from its original location, that being in our case the folder with your images in. There are two methods of getting images into InDesign, and they are both almost as easy as copy and paste. The first is to drag and drop. Window both the folder with your images inside and InDesign, and just drag the image into the document. The image should now be stuck to the cursor. From here, we can left click and hold the left mouse button and drag it out to the size that we want the image to be. The image should be selected, so we're able to delete it by just pressing delete on the keyboard. The other way to import is to use the place command. Press Ctrl+D or go to the file heading on the menu bar and choose place. The first time you do this, you will need to navigate to your images folder, but this location will stay as default from then on. Now, if we open up our links panel, we should be able to see our first image link. The page number it's linked at will be highlighted in orange, and if we expand this window a little, we will be able to view some information about the image. From here, I can see that the image is a JPEG and its color space is RGB. If your work is for digital submission, then it should remain in RGB color mode. If, however, you plan to print the document, then you should ideally change this from RGB to CMYK. Converting them using Photoshop will give you a more accurate impression of how the colors will appear when printed. We can also view two other values here, the actual PPI and the effective PPI. What this is telling us is that our image resolution is 72 pixels per inch, which, if viewed at full size, would be too low for print as it would display significant pixelation. However, due to the size we have assigned to the image, it is now way smaller than its native size, and so its resolution is now way above that value, making it perfectly usable. Generally, if we intend to print, PPI should be at least 250 and ideally 300, although anything above 300 is unnecessary. If we don't scale our images when we import, then they will always come into the document at their native size. We can see this in action if we scroll to the next page. Left-click anywhere on the blank area to deselect the last image. Pick another image using the Place tool, only this time, just left-click it once it's on your cursor. If your image was created using a smartphone, then you will likely find that it's gigantic compared to the page size, and likely has a resolution of 72 ppi. To get a better impression of just how big it is, let's zoom out. Now, there are a few ways to zoom in and out of a document. You can go to the View heading from the menu bar, where you will find Zoom Out, Zoom In, and several other zoom in size options. You can also select the Zoom tool from the toolbar, which will allow you to zoom in by left-clicking, draw out a zoom square, or hold down Alt and then left-click to zoom back out. Personally, I'd advise against using these two previous methods and instead recommend using a mouse. You can move between pages by scrolling the mouse wheel, or zoom by using the mouse wheel while holding down Alt. I primarily use the keyboard shortcuts Ctrl and minus and Ctrl and plus to zoom, as well as Ctrl and 0 to fit the page to window. In addition, we can hold down the spacebar and then left-click and drag to navigate around the screen. So zooming right out to view our gigantic image, you will notice that the image isn't just visible on the page, but also on the large grey area which surrounds it. This area is called the pasteboard and is used to create or store content on before we arrange it on the page. This is particularly useful when working with a lot of content. If we press the W key on the keyboard, we will activate the preview mode. This displays the elements which will be visible when we create a PDF. Notice that our guide marks are no longer visible. We can also activate presentation mode by pressing Shift plus W, or go into View on the menu and then Screen mode and then Presentation. The up and down arrow keys will allow us to view each page, and pressing Escape will allow us to exit this mode. We will also need to press W a second time to return to normal mode. We should still have the selection tool selected on our toolbar, but if not, press V to select it, and then click on our giant image again to make sure it's selected. Then press Delete to remove it. So let's imagine we want our first and second page to have the same design. Again, we're going to place another image, Ctrl plus D, on our second page. Try your best to make the sizing the same between both pages. Something you will notice is that even though we haven't filled our column guides with text, they can be useful for aligning our images. There are, however, more effective alignment methods, so let's have a look at one of them. From the menu, go to Layout and choose Margins and Columns. Set your column number to 1 and press OK. This will remove the columns from the document. Next, go to Layout a second time, and this time go to Create Guides. Once that dialog is open, set rows to 5 and columns to 4. In this instance, choose Fit Guides to Page. This should give us a well-placed guide to duplicate our page designs. Once those changes are complete, I would like you to also apply those changes to the second page. Once that is done, we can focus on making some adjustments to our images. Now, an important concept to grasp when working with InDesign is that all content which is added to a page must exist within a frame. So when we create a text or import an image, we must create both the content as well as the frame that it sits within. This is handy as it allows us to add, modify, and remove things without effect in the rest of the document. This can be demonstrated as we modify these images. When I select an image, I'm selecting both the frame and the content within it, and I can move both of them around if I have the selection tool active. If instead, however, I hover over the control points on the edges of the frame and start moving them, I start making changes to the frame, concealing the content within it. Similarly, if I want to resize my image by dragging the corner points in or out, I only end up adjusting the frame. This is probably a good time to make you aware of the undo button. Pressing Ctrl plus Z will take you back one step. You can continue taking one step back every time you press it. Also, if you go too far, you can press Ctrl plus Shift plus Z to take you forward one step again. These commands can also be found under the Edit heading on the menu bar. So, with the image frame back how it was, there are a few more things to mention. If we double click into the image, you will notice that now a golden brown frame appears. This is InDesign telling us that we have currently selected the image alone rather than the frame. With this selected, we can click and drag the image around within the frame. Clicking on the corner edge will allow us to increase or decrease the size of the image, although be aware that you can easily distort your image this way. To prevent this, we can hold down the Shift key, which will constrain the image's proportions while we scale it. Now, click on some blank area of the page or pasteboard to deselect it, and click the image once again to select the frame. Notice that if you hover over the center of the image, your cursor will turn to a hand. This is called the content grabber and allows you quick access to the image within the frame. This can sometimes be activated unintentionally, however, so be aware of this. After many adjustments, you can sometimes find that the frame becomes larger than the content held within it. This can quickly be amended by double-clicking on one of the corner points, which will refit the frame to the content once again. One of the final and most useful adjustments is being able to rescale both the frame and content at the same time. We can select the Free Transform tool from the toolbar, which will allow us to scale both elements simultaneously. However, once again, we need to hold down Shift in order to scale things proportionately. Alternatively, we can return to the Direct Selection tool, hold down Ctrl and Shift, and then drag to scale both elements without the need of a special tool. Now the next thing we're going to do is look at adding a shape. Go to Toolbar and then select the Rectangular tool. This location is where we can also find other basic shapes. If you right click on the tool, you will see that we also have options for an ellipse tool as well as a polygon tool. For now, let's stick to the rectangle. Click and drag it out so that it's the size of around 4 squares down by 2 squares across. Next, we're going to add some color to the shape we've created. With this workspace active, we have two locations where we can access the color palette. One is located at the bottom of the toolbar, and the other can be found in the middle of the options bar up here. You'll see that we have two palette windows available. The top one is called the Fill. The Fill fills the current object you have selected with color. As an example, we can double click on the Fill pane and it will bring up the color picker. We can then pick a color of our choice, and once we're happy, press OK. The second color square is called the Stroke. The stroke is the outside line of any object. If the object is just a line or some text, then all that exists is the stroke, and so it cannot be filled with color. The color of your stroke will be displayed in this square. If you have no stroke or fill selected, it will display a red strike-through line. We can better see the effect of the stroke by adjusting the line weight of the stroke. This can be done from the options bar. Increase the line weight here until you can plainly see a border around the rectangle. Next, we're going to change our colors by using swatches. Notice that from our panels, we can access both our swatch window as well as an extended number of stroke options. I'd like you to close these for the moment, however, and instead access the swatches from the button next to the Fill window on the options bar. If you set the Fill to none, we're just left with the frame. We can also turn our stroke to none, as we won't be needing that for the moment. This time I want to set our fill color to one of the pre-existing swatches. Click again to access our swatches and pick the blue. What I'd like to do is give this shape a bright color which contrasts well against the car. To do this more accurately, I can use a few of Adobe's tools. Press I or select the eyedropper tool from the menu bar. Click on the dominant color of your image. For me, this would be the red. And two things should now have happened. My palette color has been reassigned to the color I just sampled, and the shape I have been using has turned the same color because it was still selected. So to help me find a good complementary color to this red, I'm going to utilize one of InDesign's special features. Go to the window heading from the menu, hover over Color and choose Adobe Color Themes. It will likely take a few moments to load up. This tool is an integrated version of Adobe Color, which exists as a website to assist users in developing their own color palettes. I would highly recommend also visiting this website, as there's more content available which can easily be imported back to our program using Adobe libraries. For now, let's look at what we have here. Hover over the second icon below the 5 color palette and click it. This will import our current fill color from the tools palette. Next, move over to the 4th icon called Color Rule, and rather than using analogous, I'm going to choose complementary. You can see that the colors have changed significantly. We still have our sample color in the center, but our opposite color is now a green. Select this green and then press the first icon, which will set the color as our new active fill color. It will also fill our square with the same color if it is still selected. Personally, I'm not a fan of this green, so I'm going to go to the 4th option once again, and this time choose a triad scheme, which will still offer some punchy alternative colors. I'm going to try out the blue here by repeating the steps, but I'm still not really happy with the results. I'm going to modify this blue by adjusting its position on the wheel until I find a variant which I like. Notice that the closer I bring the sample to the center, the more I reduce the color saturation. Now I think I'm happy with this tone. I'm going to set this as my active color, and I'm also going to press the 3rd icon, which will add this tone to my swatches. If we open back up our swatches from the options bar, we will see that the new color has been added there. If we then double click on our color picker again, we can see that there is always the option to add the current color as a new swatch, and also that each color gets its own unique hash number, which is displayed here. This number can often be inputted into a color website or communicated to clients when you're unable to send a file. Let's now turn our attention to the second image. We're going to create another shape with the same dimensions to the one above. While we are trying to fine-tune our placement of this shape, I should mention a very useful method of achieving this is to use the directional keyboard arrows. Moving them in any direction nudges the object in the same direction. Okay, so we're going to color our shape again, only this time I'd like to go with a color that is very close to the tones that we see in the image. To do this, first return to our selection tool and select the image. We're then going to use the Color Theme tool from the toolbar. It's on the same level as the eyedropper tool, and we may need to right-click the location first to select it. The tool may immediately activate, or you may need to click the image first. You'll notice that again we get a 5-color palette, only these colors are based on the ones within the image. We have a few options here. We can add all the colors to our swatches or CC libraries. I know we haven't covered CC libraries yet, but feel free to open up the panel and take a look. Essentially, it's a method for storing assets which can be accessed and transferred between Adobe applications. For now, let's stay with the theme tool. We have some various options here in the drop-down, offering more choice. So I'll try a few of these out. If you don't feel any of these are working, a very effective alternative is to simply pick a colour from the image itself. Press I for the eyedropper tool and again get a colour from here. I'm then going to right click the colour on the palette and use the option to add it to my swatches. Now even though I'm not going to do it here, I'd strongly recommend renaming your swatch colours to something more useful. Okay, that's colours all covered. One remaining obvious issue here is that my shape is sitting on top of the image. So how do we sort this out? Open your layer panel and you will see that we only have one layer. If we click to expand it, you will now see that every element which we have created so far is sitting on its own sublayer. I want you to note the order in which the content is positioned. The items at the top of the list will always sit above everything else. Notice also the blue squares here. They are telling us that we are working on layer 1 and that the rectangle shape is currently selected. If I want to see my image on top, then I can just select it and drag it up above my rectangle. Personally, I very rarely do this, but instead use the shortcut Ctrl plus the bracket key to move the selected item up by one layer stack, or Ctrl plus the other bracket key to move the layer down by one layer stack. Object and Arrange from the menu will also give us the options to control this. One more super handy thing to know about layers is that they can be locked in place. For example, a background colour in InDesign is nothing more than a coloured shape dragged over the entire image, like so. Now typically, we will be working on content which sits on top of this. To give you an example, I'll draw out a few shapes, and then I shall duplicate these shapes by simply holding down Alt and dragging them to duplicate. I can do this a number of times, and I will be left with multiple shapes all over my screen. The issue quickly occurs that it becomes harder and harder to select the content that I want without accidentally selecting and moving the layers below. This issue can be quickly fixed by locking the layers. If I select my blue background and press Ctrl plus L, I will lock the layer, making it impossible to select. You'll notice that now that it's locked, I'm also able to select the car image below it. Looking up to the layers panel, you will see a padlock icon over that layer. I can turn it on or off here, or, while it is still on, mouse over the layer and then press Ctrl plus Alt plus L to unlock it. Finally, notice the visibility icons next to the layers. Turning these off is also a useful method to avoid selecting things and viewing particular elements of your design. With layers introduced, I would now like you to press the undo shortcut many times until we get rid of all these shapes and we are back to the point that you see just here. I think between our two images, I'm going to focus on the second in order to develop our design a bit further. Looking at the direction which the girl is facing, I suspect it would look better if the image was flipped. With the image selected, I'm going to go to Object, and then Transform, and then Flip horizontally. I think that does feel more like she's walking towards us rather than leaving the image now. There's also a few little things which I feel could use a little bit of adjustment. Firstly, that brown that we selected I think could just do with being a tad deeper, so what I'm going to do is just resample it. And once that's done, I also think these frames could do with a little bit of adjustment. And I also think there's a little bit too much room above her, so perhaps we could just increase the size of the image just slightly. Yeah, I think that's looking a lot sharper now. Let's talk about text. Press T or select the text tool from the toolbar. To add text, just like any other content, we first need a frame. The text tool has a built-in frame creator. Left click and drag out the frame and you will see the text cursor appears within it. And just something to clarify here, even though we have text frames and shapes and text boxes, they are essentially all the same thing. For example, we can select the rectangular frame tool here and then select the text tool, click inside the frame, and suddenly it becomes a text frame. Similarly, we can use the shape tool. Right click to get the circle tool, draw out a circle, and then again select the text tool. Click inside it and it becomes another text frame. Alternatively, we could click out of it, select the shape again, and then use the circle to place an image inside. Naturally it will need resizing, but you get the idea. Delete these two shapes and let's return to our first text frame. Now just like we place images, we can place text also. If you have a well-formatted text document, then there's good reason to place it directly into the text frame. There are, however, a few issues also. Even though fonts are stored in a single location on a PC, I've still found compatibility issues when trying to import Word files that I've produced. Similarly, formatting transfers unpredictably at times. Even though some would disagree with this approach, I generally favour copy and pasting text into frames from an edited Word document, and then fine-tuning the formatting once it's there. While this is bad practice with imagery, I've experienced very few issues when using text in this way. If you're in a position where you don't currently have any text, then fear not, as InDesign has a function called Fill with Placeholder Text. If we right-click while in the frame and scroll about 2/3 of the way down, we will find the option there. It can also be found from the Type heading on the menu bar. Clicking this will fill your entire frame with nonsense text, commonly known as lorem ipsum. A friendly reminder here is to always treat your text as another design element. It's very easy to see design as everything other than the text, but in reality, text formatting and careful font selection is an integral part of page design. Just looking at the amount of text formatting options available on the options bar, not to mention the further options available if we switch to our paragraph formatting tools, should give you some indication of the time designers invest in this area. Many of these options include custom type design and paragraph and character styles, which will be covered in later videos. For now, we're going to restrict ourselves to updating the font from the default Minion Pro. To do this, I'm going to double click into the text frame to activate the text editor and then press Ctrl+A to select all. I'm then going to go to the font options and type the name of an alternative font. I'm also going to slightly decrease the font size to 11. Feel free to choose your own, but try to pick something which is easy on the eyes for the body text. Something else to note is that we can click to find other options here. We can select our favourite fonts or find ones which are similar. Likely the most useful function, however, is Find More, which will allow you to download loads more fonts from Adobe's website. You simply need to click the cloud icon and then wait a few moments. I have experienced a little glitchiness with this though, so it may require a few attempts or a restart. I'm also going to change my font colour to a dark brown rather than a black. To do this, double click on the palette pane, which is now a T, and use the color picker. Search through until you've found a dark brown or any other color which matches your image. Once you're happy with this, you can right-click the active color and then save it as a swatch. One other thing I'm going to do is increase my leading a bit by adjusting it here. This will make my text easier to read. I'm going to press Escape to deselect the type and then create a subheading by just selecting the top two lines. I'm going to turn everything to uppercase and then increase the weight of the text to semi-bold. I'm also going to add a line break. As well as this, I'm going to add a title. It's quite likely that we'd use a more interesting font for our title. I'm going to use the font Abril Fatface, which is a font I've already downloaded from the cloud. I'll then scale up the frame and text by using Ctrl plus Shift while corner dragging to the size of my liking. I'll then again colour it with my brown swatch. And to finish her off, I'm going to add a line underneath. You can use the backslash to select this, or just get it from the toolbar. Hold down Shift while you drag this out to help keep the lines straight, and this time change the stroke to our brown colour rather than the fill. I'm also going to thicken up the stroke while I'm here. Now I'd like to show you one more thing, and that is how we typically handle overset text. Notice the error message that we have at the bottom bar of the window. Double click to expand it, and then mouse over to confirm that the error is being caused by overset text. This basically means that we have too much text in the text frame, so not all the text is being displayed. I'm going to show you how we can continue this text, but also at the same time show you another feature. So I'm going to draw another rectangle down the other side of the frame. You will likely first need to right click and select the rectangle tool from the shape options. I'd like to move the subject as far as I can to the left, and once this is done, I'm going to fill the shape with black, and while it's still selected, open the effects panel on the right hand side, and we're going to change the blending mode to multiply here and change the opacity to 75%. Once that's done, draw out another text frame inside this shape. You may find it useful to lock some of these layers if they start getting in your way. If we now return to selecting our body text from the overset, we can click on the small red square, which will load our cursor with the excess text. Next, hover back over the other text frame and click to continue the text flow into this new location. Now, the amount of text here seems insubstantial, and I also think the continuation isn't very logical. But making you aware of this distribution feature is very useful when creating your layouts. Also, the text in this new frame isn't very legible in its current colour, so we're going to select it and then recolor it white. I'm also going to select it, copy and paste it until I'm happy with the amount in the frame. Now, something else we could do is soften the edges of the frame. You could do this by clicking on the yellow square and then reducing the size and dragging the corners to round the edges, like this. On reflection, however, I'm not really convinced that this works well here, so I'm going to revert this change. Finally, I'm going to finish it off with some purely unnecessary decoration. I'm going to create another text box and then go to glyphs from the type heading, and this time actually choose to select Minion Pro, and from the options choose a few graphical looking elements. I'm then going to resize the text box, scale it up, and then rotate it so it's turned 90 degrees. And once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go over to effects again, and this time turn the opacity to around 20% and change the blend mode to screen. So to finish this off, we're going to cover how to save and export our work. We've spent a criminally long length of time working on this exercise without saving our work. Ideally, we should be saving as often as possible. Saving the document is quite straightforward. We simply need to go to Save As from the File menu and hit Ctrl+S to make additional saves. When saving your file, try to give it a meaningful name, such as Year 1 Design Exercises Version 1, and then hit Save. Now what we've just done is saved all the content which is embedded in the file, such as the text, as well as the locations of where to find the images. What we haven't saved in the file, however, is the images themselves. This won't be a problem as long as the file structure remains intact. However, should these images get moved or a saved file be moved to another location, we will lose access to this content and our images will no longer be displayed. There's a few steps we can take to avoid ever encountering these issues. One of these is to output our finished work as a PDF. You will find Export within the file heading. Choose PDF Print or Interactive PDF depending on whether the file has interactive elements or rather it is just a digital print. In the dialog box, there will be a few things which we need to consider. Firstly, check the summary for errors. Sometimes you will have overset text or content which runs off the pages. Assess these warnings to conclude whether you are able to proceed. If all is good, set your PDF preset to high quality print under General, and also set pages or spreads accordingly based on the design of your document. We would want to set pages for exercise 1. As we aren't sending this to a printer, we won't need to activate our marks and bleeds, but be aware this is the area where you would turn these on. After that, you can press export. The very final method of saving our work is to package the file. The command can again be accessed from the File menu. What this option does is automatically create a folder with all your linked files stored within it, even the fonts you have used. You will first need to save your file and then you will be prompted to choose which elements you wish to include. You have the option of creating a PDF of your work here and can also choose to save your work in IDML format. This is a simplified legacy InDesign format and I would recommend that you do this. When we confirm the package, we will end up with a single consolidated file with all the elements inside. This is excellent if you need to travel with your file or store it in a secondary location. Just be aware that this folder will contain all your content, and that could make your folder very large. Okay, that's a wrap. That should have you set up and able to complete all the fundamental InDesign tasks. I hope you enjoyed this training and look forward to seeing you for a more advanced follow-up video. Goodbye for now.